If you struggle with coming up with different card designs for one stamp set, then you're in luck because I'm showing you 3 different ways to use one stamp set, whether that's stepping up with a bit of a dimension, adding some texture, or changing the size of the card. There's hopefully a design here that will spark your creativity for your next paper crafting project. This video is part of the Altenew semi-double chrysanthemum blog hop. Make sure if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, you also check out my blog to enter the giveaway. I'm Verity and welcome to my YouTube channel Pretty Little Button, where I make paper crafting tutorials for the everyday crafter. For this card I am using the new Altenew semi-double chrysanthemum stamp set. This is a layering stamp set, but you can use any layering stamp set you have or non-layering stamp in your craft stash. I am just going to show you how I stamped this and what colours I have used. So for this card I'm not using the outline layer first. Instead I went in with the first solid layer. I decided to do this way because I thought in case I got to adding all the layers and I decided I really liked the look without the actual lines, I could leave it as is, so it's sort of a no line stamping look. But if I decided I didn't like that and I wanted the lines for definition, I can add it in at the end. So that's why I've started off with stamping the first bold layer to the flower. Now this is brand new, so I'm just using my rubber just to condition the stamp a little bit, because there will be some residue left over from the manufacturing process, and I'm just rubbing this with a rubber. However, if you use a MISTI stamping tool, if you don't get perfect stamping straight away, it's not a problem because you're using a stamping platform that allows you to re-stamp. So you can just ink it back up and re-stamp again, which I am doing here because I was getting a few blotches with such a bold solid layer. So the first layer I have used to do this flower in is Dewdrops, and this is a lovely soft aqua colour. Now the more you do layer it up, the darker the colour is. And because I'm making 3 card designs, I'm going to bulk stamp a lot of these images. So I can just rotate my card and stamp it again. And I do several card panels in Dewdrops, and then I'm also going to do a blue colour. So for this blue flower, the first layer I'm stamping on is Iceberg. And I thought these colours kind of paired quite nicely with one another. So I'm then going to add the second layer of the flower, and I'm using the layering guide to help line this up. The layering guides are really useful. It gives you a few key points on the stamped images of where to align them and to ensure you get a really good stamped image. Again, because I'm using my MISTI tool and I'm just placing it over the stamp, I can then carry on my bulk making. For the second layer of the green flower, I then stamped this in Volcano Lake ink. And for the blue flower, I did this in Eastern Sky. For the third layer, more detailed layer, I used Lagoon for the green, and then I used Ultramarine for the blue. Now I decided then I wanted to stamp one of the flowers in the outline, and I did this just in the last layer, the Lagoon ink again, and then I compared them side by side, and you can see there is a little bit of extra definition. I did like how it finished the card off, so I stamped all of the flowers in the outline as well. Now the stamp set does come with some leaves, and I did stamp these. I stamped the outline and the last definition layer in just green, and then the solid layer I stamped in Sweet Leaf, and I stamped a variety of different leaves from the stamp set multiple times on my panel, getting the most out of my cardstock as well. Now I used all the coordinating dies to die cut these out, and then I'm just working on some of my card designs. So for this card I wanted to add a bit of texture to the background to add interest to the card design. I am using the Altenew narrow brick stencil here. I have just sprayed it with some repositionable adhesive on the back just to keep it in place. It is quite a delicate stencil, so that's why I wanted to make sure I stuck it down really well temporarily whilst I apply some Altenew embossing paste. Now you can go ahead and colour this embossing paste with your inks if you wanted to, but I just wanted a bit of tone-on-tone texture to the background. I didn't really want to detract from my actual focal image, which will be the flowers. So this is a great way of just stepping up your card design, adding a little bit of interest, but not overpowering and overtaking the card. So there with the peel and reveal, you get this lovely thin narrow brick look. So for another card, another way to switch up your design is to then change actually the size of the card and the orientation or the area that you have to design in. So a slimline card is really, really perfect for this. Now, because I'm using these flowers, they are quite nice and big and bold. They fit really well for a slimline card. For a better design, it's great to keep sort of odd numbers. So that's why I've gone for 5 flowers. But I've also alternated the flowers for a little bit more interest. And that again gives you a bit of variation to your design. Now I'm just overlapping all these flowers, alternating the direction they're in, and I'm adding some foam pads behind them to give them a bit of depth and dimension. All of this just adds to a more interesting card design at the end. Now once I'd stuck these all down, I then added a sentiment. I used the Altenew signature words die. I used the congrats. Now this I cut out of gold foil, and I cut out of some white card as well to layer up for dimension. Because this is a really fiddly little sentiment die, I used some of the Altenew double adhesive sheets on the card just to adhere them. It made it so much easier to adhere. I didn't have messy glue, especially when using a foil card. You don't want to be messing around with glue because that can get on the foil and ruin it. I also added another sentiment from Altenew sentiment strips stamp and finished it off with a scattering of gold sequins. So once my embossing paste panel had dried, I can then add my focal image. So I'm keeping to the odd numbers in design here. I'm using 2 flowers and some leaves. I've got 3 different colours, so that's that 3, and I've also positioned it in a sort of a triangular formation, which is much more appealing to your eye. I then heat embossed a sentiment from the Altenew Paint-a-Flower stamp set. I've heat embossed this and then just fussy cut that out. And I've added it to the corner of the flower arrangement. That's where your eye is drawn down into. This was then just finished off with a few black Nouveau drops. This just helps tie in the black card with the sentiment and also just adds a bit of contrast to that tone-on-tone background that you've got with this card. For the last card, I hadn't used much of the foliage that I had stamped and die cut. So instead I thought, well, this is a great way to use this to add a background, but add some foam pads behind to create a dimensional background, as though these leaves are floating on the card. Now, when I was positioning these, I was putting these down, allowing them to overhang the card because I was going to trim that off, but this gives a much more natural and realistic design when it overlaps and overhangs because it's going to look like the pattern is continuous and it's not just solely made for this card. Now I positioned one of the flowers in the middle as I was adding all the leaves because I knew I was going to position the flower there. There's no point using any of my stamped images in the middle where they're going to be covered up by that flower. Once I cut off all the overhang and excess, I just reused some of that with some more foam pads just to fill in some of the gaps around the edge, just as I say, to make it look more of a cohesive design. This flower sits beautifully in the middle. It can take focal point because all of the leaves are sort of surrounding it, so your eye is drawn into that focal image. And it's got a lovely contrast between those soft greens and that dark teal colour combination. This was also foam mounted onto the card, but I used a double layer of foam pads just to lift it a little bit more from that background to draw your eye to it. And then to finish this card off, I just used a sentiment. I just heat embossed a sentiment onto some black card, cut it into a strip to foam mount onto the card. As the background was quite busy, I didn't really need to add any embellishments to this card. So I hope you've been able to see a variety of different ways of using one stamp set in different card designs and how you can change it up quite easily to create new cards. This is part of the Altenew blog hop for the Build-a-flower stamp set, so make sure if you're watching this over on my YouTube channel, you head over to my blog to enter the giveaway and hop along. The more you comment, the more chance you have to win. If you're new here, think about subscribing and you can hit that bell icon to be notified when my next video is up. Until next time, happy crafting!